Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're hanging out with the one and only Joti Brar. Let's talk. Hello, Garland and Joti here, and it's Tuesday morning, and we are here to, have a discussion. There are a lot of people who are frustrated. I think that's the term. They're frustrated, and they feel as though there's nothing that can be done. I always go back when I was a kid. There was a cartoon called Gulliver's Travels. And Gulliver was on the island with the little Lilliputians, of course. And every week there'd be some threat to him. Somebody came to the island. There was a monster. There was people. There was something. And they had to come up with a plan as to how they were going to, survive or whatever, make it through the weekly catastrophe. And there was one guy. He was actually my favorite one. He had one line, and he said the same line every week. They'd come up with their plan, blah, blah, blah. And this guy was in the back of the crowd, and this was his line. It'll never work. We're all doomed. That was the guy. That's all he said. It'll never work. Well, there's no shortage of it'll never work. They're all doomed people out here. And you'll certainly understand it. I mean, look at this monstrosity we're up against. The West is in collapse and trying to drag us into war. We look around at our friends and sometimes family, and they're brainwashed. And of course, though even our allies are pretty much horrified. Let's talk about this, not just the need to fight. We can start with that. The reason that we really need to fight this neoliberal monstrosity, but we'll start with the need to, and we'll go on to how we can, what the things that we can do, how we can be and feel more empowered. I'll say one other thing. My dad used to say this: the cure for fear is action. And oftentimes that's what we look at. Fear. Oh, God, that was that guy. It'll never work. That's so many people. Oh, wow, we're doomed. They're too powerful. Blah, blah, blah. The cure for fear is action. So let's talk about that. Joti Brar.
100% the cure for fear is action, Garland. And when we realize, when we actually take action together in a coordinated way, we learn to feel our power. And that's the best way to banish the fear of the power of the ruling class, is to feel our own power. But we can't feel that without being organized and working together, because obviously, as individuals, we are weak and we feel powerless. What we have allowed to happen, and I won't give you a massive history lecture, I know it's my want, it's what I'm famous for, but over the last, basically since the death of Stalin, sorry people, always to bring it back to that, but it's true, since the death of Stalin, the communist movement went into retreat mode. They started parroting and echoing the idea that the imperialists are so powerful that we have to tread carefully and step back from anything that might upset them, because then we might have a confrontation, and wouldn't that be awful? And this was reflected in the politics of every communist party. So it started in the Soviet Union, not only there, but essentially came from Khrushchevite revisionism, Khrushchev being the leader who followed Stalin in the Soviet Union. He wanted rapprochement with the West rather than confrontation. He talked about peaceful coexistence, not in the sense of we won't attack you, we don't want a war, but we're ready to defend ourselves, but in a kind of let's just lie down and not make problems for the West kind of a way. And from the revisionist Soviet party, revisionism, can't say it, spread across the communist movement all over the world. Why does this matter? Why this matters, Garland, is because what a lot of people either don't know or have forgotten is that it was the communists who kept the trade union movement strong and militant. It was their grassroots influence that kept the leadership of the trade unions in the West on point, that kept them fighting for the class interest, because without that, they were always looking to come to an agreement. They were always ready to sell out the interests of their members. And what we've seen as the communist movement has fallen into disarray and disintegration, the natural inclination of the leadership of the Western labor movements, which is to compromise with and actually support imperialism in controlling the working class, has become the prominent trend. And now we have trade unions that nobody has any faith in anymore. We have trade union leaders who aren't trusted by the membership. We have trade union leaders that in Britain, they get knighted and given honours and kicked into the House of Lords at the end of a long career where the one thing they weren't doing was fighting for the working class, right? We have a totally compromised leadership of the whole of our trade union and supposedly anti-capitalist, anti-war, anti-imperialist, whatever, anti-austerity mass movement of the working class. All its organizations are under the control of this fake opposition, this controlled opposition leadership, which Lenin described these people as a labor aristocracy. He talked about how in the imperialist countries, there's a layer of the working class which has privileged conditions, and a layer of the leadership of working class organizations who become bureaucrats who actually serve imperialism as a mechanism of control. And the reason they do that is economic. It's because they are benefiting. They get some crumbs from the table of the rich men, and they have a better life. And their life is dependent on their nice life, their holidays and their cars and their whatever, private health insurance is all it comes from retaining the system of imperialism. It comes from the crumbs from the table of the imperialist class. And so they are loyal actually to imperialism. They serve imperialism. These are the people who founded the Labour Party. These are the people who've been the leadership of our trade union movements across the West. And without a strong communist movement, they are left to do the dirty work of the imperialists. And what is the dirty work they've done? They have facilitated the defeat of every important strike movement from the 1920s until today. They have facilitated the permeation of the working class with the capitalist ideology that tells workers we are weak individuals. So the very opposite of what trade unions were originally founded to do. The original foundation of trade unions, they weren't revolutionary organizations, Garland, but they were workers, they were organization of workers' mutual self-defense. What is the only power that workers have in the capitalist system? It's the power to withhold their labor. But of course, as an individual, you withhold your labor and you just starve. You only have power if you withhold your labor collectively to the point where the bosses have to talk to you because they're not making money. If you're not working, they're not making money. Why is it that the wealth creators need you to work to make money? Right? There's a little lesson in there, isn't there? Anyway, so this is the fundamental purpose of the trade union. Why do we pay trade union dues? It's supposed to be, this was the idea of trade unions, it's supposed to be we pay our dues, it goes into a kitty, then when we need to go on strike, we don't starve. The whole point of it is it's a strike fund. Today, we have amalgamated unions that have become mega unions. They sit on huge investment portfolios. But you know what they don't have, Garland? Strike funds. What are they actually for? They're taking our money. When we want to strike, they tell us, oh, well, it's very difficult because the law says these people, and these people can't be involved. So actually, this strike only affects apparently 5 people. And even though we're a union of 5 million people, only you 5 are allowed to go on strike and no one can help you. Right? They help the ruling class make sure that the working class, even though they're in unions, are totally weak and powerless to use their only leverage that they have, which is their collective ability to fight. So we've got this situation, right, of a totally weakened leadership or mass movement because of the receding of communist influence. So all those people out there who think it's communism and communists who cause all their problems, you've been totally lied to. All right, you have been lied to, and it's time that you looked into this properly and learned your history better. Okay, there's too many YouTube wormholes out there telling you all kinds of nonsense, claiming to tell you what Marxism is. If someone's telling you what Marxism is, don't believe them. Go and look it up for yourself. Marxism is out there. It's available to read. You can buy the books cheap, or you can read them online for free. There's no excuse for talking about what Marxism is and what communists do if you've never read any Marxism. All right, just get that off my chest, because we get an awful lot of it, and especially in America. I see it in YouTube comments all the time. Oh, the communists did this, that, and the other. And it's like, says who? Based on what information?
Now they just call anything they don't like Marxism. I used to have a guy that would come on one of my radio shows, and I called him the Marxist guy because everything was Marxist. He's like, yeah, people, they're not even friendly in my area anymore. They don't even shake your hands. There's Marxists everywhere. And I ended up asking him, have you ever read Marx? He's like, no. I'm like, well, I have. So I have the ability to discern what is and isn't Marxism, and apparently you don't. Yeah, but let me say this. Here's something I keep telling everybody. Go back to the Empire of Lies speech. Here's what you started off with. This was Vladimir Putin. Here's what he said. It is a fact that over the past 30 years, we have been patiently trying to come to an agreement with the leading NATO countries regarding the principles of equal and indivisible security in Europe. In response to our proposals, we invariably faced either cynical deception and lies or attempts at pressure and blackmail, while the North Atlantic Alliance continued to expand despite our protesters' concerns. Its military machine is moving, and as I said, is approaching our very border. Exactly what you said, I believe, about Khrushchev. This idea that you're going to be friendly somehow or coexist with the imperialists, and they'll be okay with that. And if you read everything you're saying in that Empire of Lies speech, hey, we gave it a shot, and all they did every time we stuck our hand out, they stuck a knife in it.
Yeah. And what's interesting that you brought that up, Garland, is because actually, the Soviet Union and then Russia continued to try to play this, let's all be friends together, let's have a mutually cooperative relationship, let's not aggress against each other. They continued to try to play this game right up until actually the launch of the SMO. And it's actually the SMO has buried Khrushchev's nonsense about peaceful coexistence. Finally, that line has been buried. And that's a very, very good thing. That's something excellent that's come out of what's happening, is that increasingly leaders of anti-imperialist states around the world are openly recognizing, saying, and acting on their understanding that the imperialists are imperialists. They are not your friends. They cannot be your friends. It's not about nice people, nasty people. It's a system. It's a system that has its own logic. And because of that logic, they are what Vladimir Putin said, agreement incapable.
If I may add this, I think what you've just hit on something, and that is, this is a turning point in history.
Yes.
It is a point where, it's like someone who deals with a person, a business partner, a friend, or whatever the case may be. And at some point they come to the conclusion, I just can't deal with this person. And they walk away, or they terminate their business relationship. They sell their half of the business, whatever. They come to a conclusion, this ain't going to work, right? India just had to come to that conclusion. They did everything they could. Yes, we'll deal with the U.S. and we'll be on both sides and blah, blah. And the U.S. walked up, we'll stick a knife in their back and said we could care less. So it's what Russia has done has kind of opened the door. Like other countries have well, my God, if Russia's come to that conclusion, if Russia's taken that position, I guess it's okay. You know what I mean? They opened the door for Russia and India and other parts of the world to start to say, we're on board. And there's this coalition building, an anti-imperialist coalition that's saying, these people are lunatics and we're not going to deal with it anymore. It was just, anyway, go ahead. You get what I'm saying.
Totally. It is absolutely, the launch of the SMO was indeed a turning point in history, Garland. It's the beginning of a new phase of the decline of the imperialist system, of the rise of the anti-imperialist world, a new phase of crisis and war, but also a new phase of revolutionary possibilities. And that's very important, that those things go together. So while we can feel overwhelmed by the terrifying scale and possible destruction wrought by the crisis and the war, we have also to recognize and work out how to take advantage of the flip side of that, which is revolutionary possibilities. Revolutionary situations are maturing all over the planet right now, Garland. And the job of the people in every country is to be preparing themselves and working, doing everything they can to mobilize forces that when the revolutionary crisis is mature, they can do something and not allow the system to restabilize itself. Because what we're looking at right now is a desperate imperialist system trying really, really hard to restabilize itself, to bring back profitability through looting, through war, through destruction, and then reconstruction, destruction of people, destruction of property, destruction of wealth, destruction of whole sovereign countries, in order to restabilize their grip on the world and their ability to take profits. But it's going to be at the if they are able to do it, it's going to be at the expense of the mass of the population of the globe. When you look at what's happening in Gaza, you have to understand two things. We talked about this last time, didn't we? Number one, it's business as usual. And this is just bringing it home to you. This is what imperialism does. It's been if you look closely at the history books, you'll see it's been doing this non-stop. There's almost not a year in the calendar for the last however many 100 years where you can't find some similar genocidal activity going on under the in the interests of and under the control of a supervision of an imperialist power, right? This is how imperialism works. Now, humanity doesn't need this. Humanity is being dragged down by this. All these people who are so scared to get out of the capitalist system, who desperately want to make capitalism work, I've got to tell you, capitalism created modern imperialism, and it couldn't do otherwise. Even in its earliest days, capitalism wasn't the nice, fair, friendly market trading that people imagine it was. Capitalism in the earliest days was the dispossession of huge numbers of people and the enslavement of huge numbers of people in order to accumulate enough money to create large means of production. That was what was happening in the earliest stages. That was why Marx said that capital came to the world soaked in blood from head to foot. He was talking about slavery. He was talking about the looting of India, the looting of the Americas. This was all what was termed by Marx primitive accumulation. All of this suffering was the groundwork to produce the Industrial Revolution. That was the downside. It's a big downside. The upside was we got the Industrial Revolution. We got these huge new means of production, which can produce on a vast scale for a world market, unimaginable levels of existence for the whole of the population of the planet are now possible because of the huge advances in technical productive capacity and capability of humanity as a species, right? We have that now. If we look at the most advanced industrial nation on the world today, it's China. And they're showing you how far you can go. People are so terrified of AI today, Garland, because they're like, oh, it's taking our jobs. Well, people were saying that with the first machines, the Luddites were smashing machines, not because they hated advance, but because they were like, this directly takes my job and I'm going to starve, right, because of it. But we now have the possibility to make use of AI and robotics and all these advanced developments in productive capacity for the whole of humanity to work short hours and have a nice life. But what has to be removed is this parasitic imperialist class that uses every advance to crush the workers further and rinse more wealth out of them. Right? So there's two versions of what all of this technology can do. It's not like, oh, in order to have a nice life, we've got to get rid of all the machines and all the AI and all the advances. No, we've got to put them to use. We've got to put them in the service of humanity instead of in the service of profit. That's the choice that's open to us right now. Now, when we look at the situation today and the genocide today, why we have to fight is because this is not just aimed at, it's not just what happens abroad. It's not just aimed at foreigners, right? Imperialism doesn't care whose lives it destroys. It does its best to keep things more stable on the home front, simply because that makes it easier for it to wage its wars abroad. So we've talked about this before, haven't we? That there's this horrible kind of devil's bargain that you make when you accept that deal as a worker in an imperialist country. What you're saying is, give me a couple of paltry crumbs and I will pretend I can't see your hideous crimes, right? That's the deal. Okay, but even that, for the capitalist imperialist system, because of the contradictions of the way that the system works, the system of production for profit, even that is not sustainable. There are good times, we saw them after World War II, where the workers get enough of a bribe that they very happily look the other way to all the crimes. Carry on killing workers in Malaysia, carry on killing workers in Kenya. I won't look. Carry on killing workers in Palestine, in India. I won't look. In Ireland, I won't look, because I'm getting a nice life right now. But what happened? It's not sustainable. The crisis comes, and all of that experience our ruling class has suppressing and controlling populations abroad through brute terror and force and violence comes back home to be used against the population who's starting to feel angry and upset about the fact that their life is starting to look a bit like the life of workers abroad. Previously, when it didn't look quite so much like it, they were prepared to buy into ideas of, British chauvinist ideas or Western chauvinist ideas, say, well, we're just better. And it's something inherent in our brilliant British culture that makes us somewhat superior, right? So they've given all these ideas to make them feel that it's a natural order of things, that the British people on their tiny little island without that many resources over there, because they're very creative and they're very civilized and they're very clever, and therefore obviously they would have a nicer standard of living, doing not that much useful compared to the person mining in Africa who apparently has a really terrible life, but Black people are somehow a bit backward, aren't they? A bit corrupt. There's something about the way they live. Their culture's a bit backwards. What can you do? So that's how God made us. All this. And, we get fed all this stuff, and it's comfortable to just imbibe it. All of our culture, all of our media reinforces in all kinds of insidious ways these narratives, doesn't it? But we have to recognize, Garland, now the crisis is coming home to bite us here too, that the crisis is a crisis of the entire system. And the imperialist system will always keep the workers down and make the exploiters rich at their expense. And even I had a comrade, Godfrey, God bless his soul, he's gone now, but he wrote the most wonderful poem about this question of imperialism. And he was talking about two of the martyrs of the Indian liberation struggle, and talking about how he had been brought up not to see that workers in India were like him because they had a different skin color. And he talked about imperialism, and he said, it's a small comfort that the boot that stands across the sea is heavier than the boot that stands on my head. He said, the lightest boot is heavy, and the prize of freedom is great. And those are lines that always stay with me, Garland, because they're beautiful and they really sum up our situation. We workers have far more in common with the workers abroad, even if they speak different languages, even if they have a different religion, even if they wear different clothes and eat different food. We have far more in common with those workers than we do with our exploiters, who try to tell us, again, as Godfrey said in his poem, we should not be dazzled by shared whiteness of the skin. They try to tell us that our culture is one culture. We're British, we're white together, we're part of the master race, all this kind of crap. They try to make us feel that there's one type of Britishness and we're all in it together, but there's not. In every country, there are two cultures. There's the ruling classes culture and there's the working classes culture. And all around the world, working class culture has more in common than it does what separates it, fundamentally. The proletarians, as Marx pointed out, have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. But we have to unchain our minds from this idea that it's our exploiters who we have something in common with, and those foreigners are different from us, and that our loyalty is to the British ruling class, because the British ruling class do not give a damn about you. For you, they are exploitation fodder, you are cannon fodder, or you are dole fodder. You're for the scrap heap if we can't make use of you somehow or other. This system is in a massive, massive crisis. And in order to try to restabilize itself, it will push your life at home down as far as possible in order to rinse as much out of the exchequer as it possibly can. Right now, we're looking at governments across the West in massive bankruptcy. And why are they so bankrupt, Garland? It's because the exchequer has been used not to deliver decent services to the people who pay the taxes, which is mainly the workers, because the rich people know how to avoid paying taxes. Our taxes have been used to subsidize multinational corporations so that they can keep making profits, delivering services that get worse and worse, where you get less and less, but you're paying more and more. We are guaranteeing the profitability of failing companies, failing banks, failing arms manufacturers, failing service providers of all kinds. Now all our local councils are going bankrupt. I'm sure you have a similar, well, I know you have a similar thing with the states over there. One by one, they're going bankrupt, and they're all borrowing money just to pay the wages. And now then they have to borrow more money to service the debt. And they're in this massive downward spiral of indebtedness simply because they've been paying not normal amounts of money just to provide services, but huge funds to keep failing corporations going. We are constantly being given this misdirection that councils are bankrupt because they're having to spend loads of money on migrants. This is one of the stories we get told over here. They're putting them in hotels. They're spending a fortune. Yes, they're spending a fortune. Why is that? Because those hoteliers are corporations who are being paid 20 times what it would really cost to house somebody, 20 times, and they're giving them slums to live in. These people are basically being kept, these migrants are basically being kept in open-air prisons, which are presented to the public as hotels. You get the idea they're living this plush existence. Actually, they're kept in slums. The people who own the slums are paid a fortune out of the exchequer. Yes, that's disgusting, but it's the profiteers we should be angry at, not the poor bloody inmates. And those people are not, those migrants, their asylum claims are not processed. So they're sat there. They're not allowed to work. They're not allowed to leave or do anything. So they're wandering around the streets with nothing to do, no money. They can't go to work. They can't live a normal life. If they just, if someone just moved into the house next door to you with their family and went to work, you wouldn't think anything about it. They'd just be your next door neighbor. They put them in these hotels. They leave them hotels, slums, prisons. They leave them wandering around. Then they send in provocateurs into the same areas where poor working class, they always put them in rundown areas where poor working class people are living and seeing everything in their life go to shit, no jobs, no services being paid for. And they send these provocateurs in. And the job of the provocateurs is to say, you know how your life is really shit. You know how you haven't got a job anymore. You know how you can't get a doctor's appointment. You know how you can't get a hospital appointment, all of which is because of privatization and corporate looting. Did you know there's a migrant hotel down the road? Did you know they've been looking at your women? Did you know they've been looking at your children? Did you know that they're being paid loads of money to do nothing when you've got, you're living in the shit over here? There's a problem, isn't there? And so, the state deliberately sets up this misdirection and this apparent sense that the migrants are getting all the money. Of course, the reality is that migrants are a net gain to the treasury. That's why they're there. They're super hyper exploitable labor. Anyway, I've slightly gone off the topic of what I'm talking about, Garland. I'm sorry, but let me get back to the point about why we have to fight. We have to fight because this system has to go. We have to remove this parasitic class, which is the cause of all these problems. We have to remove the system that they oversee, which is the system that creates immense wealth on the one hand and humongous poverty at the other end, a constantly widening gap a narrowing number of people who actually are wealthy, a constantly expanding number of people getting poorer and poorer and poorer. The absolute poor, the very poor in our country is a category which is growing faster than any other category, Garland, and I'm sure it's the same in the States. Huge homelessness problem, huge problems of employment, huge problems with service provision. All of that is the same machine that's creating the Gaza genocide. All of that is the same machine that's launching war in Ukraine against Russia, has killed 1.7 million Ukrainians at least, and is not satisfied with that. Can't even take that and say, oh shit, we wasted all those people and we didn't win. No. They are so desperate to get a win, to get the win that they need in order to re-stabilize their system and bring back some profitability, get some looting in quick before everything melts down, that they're just looking for ways to keep the war fueled. Where can we find more manpower from? Which country can we line up next? Where can we open a new war front? I paid great attention to Laith Marouf talking to you last week, Garland, and when he talked about the possibility of a new war front in Lebanon, it made a lot of sense to me. But what you see is front after front after front, they're prodding and poking and trying to make new conflagrations in as many places as possible.
Venezuela.
All this is connected.
Yeah, Venezuela. They're threatening Venezuela. They've got Venezuela has oil, but I've been to Venezuela. Never working. So, well, those people will fight. And they are all armed.
And if you look at the mobile, there's a wonderful short video on my party's YouTube channel, Proletarian TV. Go and have a look at the shorts section. There's a beautiful clip of the Venezuelan people responding when President Maduro said to them, we're under threat. We need to beef up the militia. So they have an army, they have a navy, but they also have a citizens militia. It's a people's army. And its specific job is to defend the revolution from threats internal and external. And then President Maduro said we need a recruitment drive to beef up the numbers of the people civilians who are in the militia. More people need weapons training. More people need to be engaged with this force. We need maximum preparedness because the US imperialists are threatening us once again. It's a very real threat. It's a very possible invasion force. They're targeting us. We need to respond. There was a huge response. And what's wonderful to see is look at the faces of the Venezuelan people. Now, these are people who've known suffering. These are people who've been struggling really hard in the last 10, 15 years to keep their revolution under tremendous pressure, where the imperialists really tried to starve them into subjection. But what you see with those people, the poor masses of Venezuela, is hope. You see joy. You see real sense of empowerment. You see them, because they work together, because they feel that their state and their system is for them. They feel that their sacrifices are for something. They are in the process of relaunching the constitution of the country. And the new constitution is called the Comuna Constitution, the commune constitution. It's going to give more power to the grassroots communities in the running of the country. They already have a system of neighborhood communes where people are empowered to run or solve problems on a local basis. But the new commune constitution is going to ratchet that up to another degree and make the communes more part of running the whole of the state of Venezuela. So it's very important developments are happening there. But you see what that does to the people. They fought for this process. They've been engaged in this process the whole way. They feel that it's theirs. And so they work together to defend it. And because they have these mass popular organizations, they have this ability to harness the power of the poor masses of the country. They feel positive. They feel empowered. They are signing up joyfully to defend their country, but also with determination. They know what their power is because they've been using it to defend themselves against imperialism for 25 years. And it really shows you something, Garland, about what the solution is, that we here in the West have allowed ourselves to be robbed of this understanding that we, the working class, are the ones who make everything. We're the ones who do everything. Without us, there is nothing. We have this huge power, but we have to have a mass movement in order to harness that power. And this power has to be harnessed. We need to make sure that the opportunity that's coming to us to actually defeat imperialism on the fronts abroad and at home, it has to be taken. We have to take the opportunity. We have to fight this fight and remove this system so we can actually start to develop in real liberty and freedom towards a genuinely dignified, civilized, affluent life, affluent in the most meaningful sense, not of money and stuff, but as in a really decent standard of living, which is not at somebody else's expense, but which is something which is shared, what the Chinese call common prosperity, right? That's what socialism offers us. Socialism offers us the chance for genuinely common prosperity. And what that also means, of course, is genuine individual development, which under capitalism they talk about all the time. But in reality, most of us are not individuals that count enough to really be able to develop.
Yes. Now, let me ask you this. What would you recommend? What kind of things can people do? You know, I was talking with Lath, and he was talking about the flotilla, and I understand what he was saying. He was saying, well, you know, I feel they've been doing that over and over. It's not doing anything. You know, maybe they'd be better off to try to do something back in their own countries. What kind of things do you think people, what are some of the different, you know, I think people have to be creative, because we tend to fall into the trap of, you know, someone stands up and waves a flag that says Free Palestine, and then we say, oh, that'll work, and we all do that. And then somebody stands up and they wear a hat with a watermelon on it or something, we all do that. I think we have to be creative and find other ways on our own, instead of just kind of mimicking things that haven't changed the narrative. I think there are things that happen at times that the system even facilitates. That at times the system sees people doing things, and if the system sees you like doing something and they know that doesn't work, and I'm not saying the flotilla does or doesn't work. I'm saying if the system sees you doing something and it doesn't work, they'll get in facilitating it and say, you know, let them keep doing that. Let's facilitate it. Let's help them. Let's help them do that, because it's not really doing anything, barely an irritant, and it'll keep them busy. What do you think can happen that people can do?
Definitely. Thanks, Garland. Well, my party has a very clear line about what needs to be done, and that is a mass campaign needs to be organized of non-cooperation. What we have to recognize, we in the West, and particularly Britain and America, but also all the EU countries, is that this genocide comes from here. You've talked about this. We know this. The Zionist colony is the attack dog, one of the attack dogs in the Middle East. It's part of a network of regional control that the imperialists have set up over a considerable period of time. But the Zionist colony, occupied Palestine, Israel, it's like the jewel in the crown of the control mechanism of the Middle East. And once that falls, to get rid of all the rest will be much easier. It'll be like a kind of domino thing. It's not, of course, the front line of the resistance is in Gaza, it is in Lebanon, it is in Iran, right? It's in the Middle East. And those people are resisting. They are fighting hard, and in Yemen. All across the region, there are most tremendous fighting effort going on, and they are having a huge impact, right? But it's taking its time, because it's a very unequal fight, and it's a guerrilla warfare effort, you know, between unequal forces. So it takes time. It's not the kind of quick result that you would like to see. I believe that we're actually watching an irreversible trend now. I think that the 7th of October launched a new offensive of the Arab national liberation struggle, and that, I think, is ultimately going to be victorious. All the signs to me are that Israel is actually on its way out. But we see how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives it's prepared to take with it as it goes. And all of that is at the behest of and in the interests of the imperialists. The Zionists don't do any of this by themselves. They do it under orders. They do it on behalf of Anglo-American, in particular, imperialism. If we want to speed up the end point of that, we have to get involved here. British workers, American workers can intervene to stop their government's ability to facilitate this genocide. There are so many ways in which the British working class and the American working class are helping this to happen. not just, of course, there is serving in the military, and people should be refusing these illegal orders, but there's servicing the military bases, moving their things around. There's all kinds of technological and arms industry partnerships and interactions with between the two or three states, between Britain and Israel, between America and Israel. This whole machinery that keeps the Zionist colony afloat. For example, the British military right now is flying daily flights from Cyprus over Gaza to gather intelligence to hand to the IDF so they can do their targeting in terms of assassination or in terms of just wiping out populations. So it's a direct involvement of the British military. There'll be lots of people in Britain who have some knowledge of or connection with how those bases in Cyprus works. It's not something far away. It's a part of the British military machine. And part of the servicing of that will be happening in Britain. And there'll be all kinds of companies which are working with and for the genocide machine. One of the things that the British establishment was very peeved about, to put it mildly, was when Palestine Action, who they've now prescribed, as you know, as a terrorist organization, we'll come back to that later, right? But Palestine Action made a point of finding out all the companies that were in any way cooperating with the Israeli arms industry. Now, that's how they picked their targets. And a lot of them, there were various degrees of cooperation. So there were things like people who are making websites for Elbit, who's a big arms manufacturer, right? Or people who are letting them have office space, right? There's a whole load of ways that people are cooperating. So there's other things too, right? When it comes to the Israeli economy, for example, we know we don't want to see Israeli produce on our supermarket shelves. Now, the traditional call has always been individual boycott. Don't buy Israeli. There's a much more effective and powerful way to stop people buying Israeli, and that's for the shop workers' unions to say, we won't put Israeli products on the shelf. It's not your individual's problem to come and read the labels and choose, make your consumer choices about what to buy. The shop workers say, no. We will not allow ourselves to be part of this process. You understand me? You see how many people are involved actually when you stop and think about it. Here's another one for shop workers and print workers. We will not allow lies that normalize Zionist crimes, these war crimes, to be sold, right? We won't put out a single newspaper that's got a headline that's normalizing this genocide. So the shop workers shouldn't put them on the shelves. The print workers shouldn't print them. We won't allow this machinery of lies to just continue unhindered, like it's nothing to do with us, but actually we're all, so many of us, facilitating it. What about the people who are uploading stories to a website for a newspaper they work for? What about the cameramen who are standing in front of a journalist who's spouting this bullshit, right? All of this, every single one of those people. Now, as individuals, you protest, you get sacked. The demand must be that the unions have a policy. Anyone who's interested can come to my party's website. That's thecommunists.org. If you just search for model motion, you will find a whole bunch of kind of ideas we've put together for motions you can take to an organization of your anti-war movement, and organize your trade union branch, whatever. And obviously, you take it as a basis, you use it, you rewrite it for whatever fits your particular sphere of work, right? But almost every sphere of work, almost every trade union will have workers who are in some way facilitating the genocide machine. If every trade union and the trade union Congress, if every anti-war group, if every mass organization of the working class takes an official policy that all our members are going to refuse to cooperate with this machinery, they can't lock us all up, Garland. They can't criminalize us all. They can't sack us all. They have to go into reverse. It's a bit of a joke for people who watch the Duran that the Alexander Mercouris has this little catchphrase where he's talking about the imperialists. He doesn't call them that. He says, oh, these globalists, they've got no reverse gear. No reverse gear. Well, they do have one, but we have to force them into it. They only understand one language. It's the language of force. When it comes to the working class, our ability to force them is in the power of our numbers and the determination with which we are organized. Now, I talked earlier about the fact that we have got a totally bankrupt leadership. Here's a recent example of how bankrupt the leadership is. We had this small demonstration of 500-600 people in Parliament Square, organized by a campaign called Defend Our Juries. And they were protesting the prescription of Palestine action, and they held up signs, and most of them were like little old ladies, right? They held up signs that said, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine action. That now is a terrorism offense in Britain. 550 odd people were arrested from that demonstration, right? But that demonstration was too small, and they were left isolated. On the same day, in another part of London, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign apparently had about 750,000 people. Now, if all of those people had been in Parliament Square with the same sign, then you see the limitations of the state machinery, don't you? Right? Then you're in a position you can start to really push back and say, this is an unjust law and it must be overturned. We can't have civility before a law which is made by our enemies. We have to recognize this is not a law that's trying to protect people from murderers. This is a law that's trying to
How about this? It's trying to protect murderers from people. It's exactly the opposite.
Exactly so, Garland. And so our job is to say it's an unjust law. It's an anti-people law. We will not rest until it's been overturned. How do you overturn it? It's not with writing to your MP. It's not with asking nicely. It's not even with a small demonstration of very determined people. What it is mass organization. It's the only weapon we really have, and we have to demand that we are enabled to use it. We have to push aside or pressurize from the bottom up all of these tame, controlled leaders who are doing their best to make sure our protest goes nowhere, and let them know we will not accept this. If every single ordinary member of a trade union demands that their branch passes these resolutions, demands that the National Congress passes these resolutions, but demands that these positions are taken, there's nothing the leaders can do about it, because there's not enough of them. They keep us in subjection by telling us that they are there by some democratic mandate. But let me tell you, just to give you an idea of how democratic our unions are these days, a new leader was recently elected to a union of teachers, a small teaching union called the NSUWT, something like that. Get the initials muddled up. But the guy's Matt Rack. He used to be in the Fire Brigades Union. The membership didn't like him there. There's all kind of corruption allegations. He left there. He's never been a teacher, but he's now the chair of a teaching union. He's been kind of shoehorned in by some Trotskyites in the leadership of that union. The number of members who voted for him so that he could win the election was like 2%. This is what, and they will stand there and claim to you that it's a great democratic institution that they're heading up and they've got there by winning an election. The reality is the massive trade union members are not in any way involved in their trade unions because they feel totally disempowered. They don't feel like the leaderships represent them. But here's the truth. Those people were co-opted for a reason, because the ruling class knows what we have forgotten. The working class, when it's organized and directed properly, is incredibly powerful. They've bought off our leaders to try to stop us from using our power. But we have come to a point where we have to say enough is enough. This is not okay with us. If these people are standing in our way, we must brush them aside. But we must take back our mass organizations and use them for what they're meant for, which was to harness the power of the working class. So a mass campaign of non-cooperation, mass, not small individual acts of conscience, not little acts. Palestine Action, bless them, they were acting because nobody else was. And they felt on their conscience, they felt they needed to do something. I understand that feeling. It's horrible. It's disgusting to be forced to stand on the side and see these crimes being committed by your own government day after day after day, and to feel that no one around you is prepared to do anything. But we also see that when you're small, you can be picked off. It's absolutely irresponsible of the leadership of the trade union movement. It's criminal of them to be standing aside and mouthing platitudes and empty slogans while these crimes continue, when they had the ability to harness the power of the working class and stop it. They're just as much blood on their hands as is on the Keir Starmers and Rishi Sunaks and everybody else who's been complicit in this genocide, right? Absolutely just as much. In fact, in many ways, you could say more, because they are the key lever of working class control in our countries. But it's time we recognize that, Garland, and push them out the way, reclaim our mass organizations and use them for what they're meant for.
Yes, those are a lot of very good observations, and I see people in the chat are really responding quite well. And obviously, I think what happens with people is we grow, angry, and we throw our hands up and give up and feel powerless. And I think as people start to hear something positive, they feel empowered and they start saying, well, perhaps we're not all doomed, and perhaps it'll never work. There's something we can do. So I think that's very important. I tell you, I just keep telling people they have to go back and read the Empire of Lies speech. Yeah, they have to go back and read it, because you understand. I think a lot of people don't understand the dramatic nature of the world changes that are going on right now. Both the UK. This is what I always say. Every time there's a world war, the same three, the UK, France, and Germany are right there in the middle of it. Every stinking time there's a world war, those three are there, right? Who's going bankrupt right now? The UK, France, and Germany are right there. What's interesting is there's no honor amongst thieves, because the US is like, yeah, you guys, things aren't looking good for you. So let's sign a deal where you buy everything from all your oil and gas from us at advanced prices, at extreme prices. So as bad as things look for them, their so-called patron, the US, is making it worse. Rather than do anything to help them, the US just looks at them and says, you guys are our vassals, you're our allies, whatever you want to call it, you're on our side. So how can we suck you dry and take the last bit of blood out of your veins? It's amazing. You start understanding World War I, for starters, where they were all just fighting each other over who get to steal the goods. And now they're just the US is just like, the one that's the most powerful is the one that says, anyone less powerful than me, well, I'll just take you out so that I can survive a little bit longer.
Absolutely. As you said, Garland, and have said many times, there is no honor amongst thieves. The imperialists essentially are thieves. And the imperialist system is one where, again, the capitalist system, right from its very earliest days, has never, ever, ever been a level playing field. It's the cry of the people who wish capitalism could be made fair is, we need a level playing field. There never, ever was a level playing field. There were always discrepancies, and those were always utilized as business advantages for the strong to get stronger and the weak to be pushed out. That has been the story of capitalism throughout its entire history, and that is a process which every crisis accelerates and advances. So that's exactly what we're seeing. We did talk about it a bit last week, didn't we? That with the deepening of the crisis, the economic crisis, global economic crisis of capitalism, is what we are fundamentally looking at. The war is a symptom of that. The high cost of living is a symptom of that, right? The asset bubbles, the stock market craziness are a symptom of that. At the root of it all is a global economic crisis of overproduction. Overproduction crisis is clogging up the world's markets, making it impossible to sell goods, and making it harder and harder for capitalist concerns to make profit, right? To sell their goods and realize the profit that they've been expecting. And to keep profitability going is the only concern of any capitalist. That is the only reason they do anything, is to keep profit coming. And what we're looking at now is a deepening, probably the worst ever crisis the capitalist system has ever seen, worse than the 1930s. And we know what the 1930s led to, right? So this is built into the bones of the capitalist system. And there is no honor amongst the thieves. Everything fundamentally ends up making the workers suffer more. But even amongst the exploiting classes, there's a constant battle, and the more the crisis bites, the more vicious becomes the battle between the exploiters for the survival. To survive as an imperialist, you've got to make sure you are getting as much of the loot as possible. And that means elbowing others out of the way. And it doesn't matter who the others are. They're not all in it together. Nobody's all in it together fundamentally. They're in a battle for survival. They see each other as competition, and the workers as I said, exploitation fodder, cannon fodder, or scrap heap, useless eaters, as they like to call us, despite the fact that without us, they would have absolutely nothing at all. They are the useless eaters, in fact, not the working class. But as with so many aspects of this system, Garland, particularly of the ruling class and how it operates with its narrative construction, there's so much projection going on, isn't there? There's so much, what they accuse others of is what they in fact are guilty of themselves. When you see the horrific pornographic and terroristic and violent things they come out with and project onto others, it's like it's a guilty conscience. This is the way they act all over the world, and they are projecting it onto others and then holding those people up as bogeymen while they stand there in their very nice Ralph Lauren suit, like butter wouldn't melt in their mouths, and they're the bringers of civilized values, But the reality is quite otherwise.
Well, I think we can end up with one last thing, and that is this. What you're talking about, the need for people to mobilize together as a group, that the strength in groups. I think that's kind of what we're seeing, such as the SCO. I think we're seeing Russia and China and other countries all coming together saying they're going to sanction us. So we all need to come together for sanctions. We all need to come together to get finances. So when they do, I think we're seeing the leaders of the anti-imperialist countries. What's interesting is that Russia was the first country to see the necessity of integrating North Korea into the anti-imperialist camp. But they're coming together saying, because everything they have, Russians just, we're going to China, North Korea, you got to be there. The importance of integrating them in and not leaving anyone out. But what we're seeing is they're saying, we'll come together as a group. The imperialists are up to no good, as always, and we will all come together and we will come up with various ways as we see what they're going to do next. This is how we're going to address it. Now, they have some spies in the camp here and there that they have to deal with, but that is the reality of it. If you're organizing something for some event, there's going to be agent provocateurs, there's going to be spies. You have to take that into account, and I think they're taking that into account. And if you know who they are, it's probably best not to call them out. It's probably best to keep an eye on them. At least you know who they are. Why get those out and they'll get new ones in that you might not know who they are? You know what I'm saying? But I think it's interesting that we're seeing kind of a macro effort of exactly what you're talking about for the masses to do.
You're right, Garland. And the anti-imperialist countries, in fact, are setting the workers of the world a tremendous example, a living example of the slogan, united we stand, divided we fall. The more united the anti-imperialist movement is around the world, the more of a cohesive bloc they can form, the more chance they have of coming out of this current phase of turmoil, war, and all kinds of economic catastrophes on top, and surviving and being able to continue to offer a better life to their own people. It's very, very important that they don't, because what the imperialists are trying to do, and we see it everywhere, is pick them off one by one.
Right.
They constantly look for where do they think might be the weakest link right now. They got lucky with Syria, and it was a horrible, terrible tragedy, but that's emboldened them. They're like, yes, we can still do this. We can still do it. Even though initially they thought Russia was the weakest link. Remember all the propaganda they told everybody about how it's just a gas station with a flag, blah, blah, blah. We can take it down. It will fall over at the first puff, huff and I'll puff, and they'll blow their house down, right? Didn't work, did it? So, but they don't give up because they need this to happen. So they thought Iran was the weakest link. They got bit back. Then we heard Laith talking last week about maybe they think Lebanon's the weakest link. I think they'll be wrong. But it's not going to stop them trying. They might think another bite at Venezuela is going to help them because they've done a lot of damage economically to Venezuela. They might be hoping that another push and they'll get over the line and the regime will fall, right? They never stop trying while they're alive. And this is something why it's so important that people in the West must not just sit on the sidelines and say it's okay because the anti-imperialist bloc is coming together and they're fighting imperialism for us. What we have to realize is for as long as the imperialists exist in the world, they will never stop trying to destroy every territory that's sovereign and independent and recolonize and reconquer it. And they'll use every kind of dirty method to get their way, so long as they can sit on a pile of cash, Garland, that they can use to fund their dirty wars and their dirty operations and their covert operations of all kinds. And remember, they're the ultimate drug runners. They're the ultimate human people traffickers. They're the ultimate pimps. They're the ones who are engaging in, they're the ultimate mafia bosses. They're the ones who engage in and run all of the kind of crime that messes up ordinary people's day-to-day lives. The big bosses are the ones who sit in Wall Street and the City of London and oversee all of that, all for the purposes of running their dirty ops to undermine the people who are trying to get free, right? So let's understand this as a whole big picture and recognize imperialism must be beaten on both fronts. It's perfectly possible that the anti-imperialist bloc, Russia, China, Iran, the Middle East generally, the DPRK, that these people can emerge from this period of global warfare victorious. Venezuela, Cuba, all of them, right? That they together stand together and defend one another and come out on top and defeat militarily the West. But for as long as the West still sits on this mountain of capital that it's able to use to buy mercenaries, to brainwash people, to change history books and the media landscape in country after country in order to take over the political system and use countries and peoples as its proxies, it will always be able to unstabilize, destabilize, undermine countries that are trying to just get free, just build a better life for themselves and their people. Our job is to make sure that can't happen by dispossessing the super rich. They have to be separated from their piles of cash, Garland. They have to be denied the ability to continue to wage dirty operations, dirty wars with other people's territory, other people's bodies, other people's wealth, to keep themselves as imperialist global exploiters. We have to recognize that and not sit on the side, but see that our role is a vital one in enabling humanity to finally get free.
Joti, please tell everyone where they can, find you and follow you and your recommendations.
Thank you. So I have a Telegram channel, my name, Joti Brar. My party has an excellent Telegram channel also, The Communists with an S. This is our website URL, thecommunists.org. Please come there and have a look. Sign up to our email newsletter. And if you can, subscribe to our physical newspapers, because as I always say, physical literature is much better learning material than just reading online. And also, if you go to our YouTube channel, we have got video presentations and speeches on all topics of importance to the working class, going back for the last 15 more years. So it's a tremendous resource and really worth subscribing and following that there.
Thank you very much. And after this, let's see if we can get a word from Keir Starmer. Thank you very much. Joti Brar, everyone. Follow her and all her endeavors. Make sure you share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.